This is a Film Stories original podcast.
Hello everybody and welcome to Writers on Cannes. My name is John Bleasdale and I'm delighted to be joined by Thomas Flight, who is a prominent film YouTuber who's created a series of visual essays which I've long admired. So it's a really huge pleasure to meet you, Thomas, finally, and to have you on the show.
Thanks so much for having me. I just recently got the chance to read your Malick biography and really enjoyed it. So it was fantastic to meet you here, and I'm excited to talk about some films.
This is what film festivals is all about,
yes,
isn't
exactly.
it? It's crossing paths with people that you've admired from a distance, and that's certainly the case for me. So we're going to talk about a few films that we've seen recently, two that we both saw yesterday, and one we saw earlier in the festival we haven't had a opportunity to talk about, but I'd love to get your perspective on. So let's start with Ari Aster's Eddington, which is his fourth film, I believe. I'm thinking Hereditary, Midsommar, Beau is Afraid, and now Eddington. Stars Joaquin Phoenix as Sheriff Joe Cross, who is the sheriff of a town, the eponymous town, in which Pedro Pascal plays the mayor, Ted Chavez, and Emma Stone plays Joe Cross's wife, Louise Cross. It's set during the pandemic.
Yes.
And plays out a little bit like a Western, the sheriff against the mayor. Lots of jurisdictions are being divide the town between the Pueblo Indians and the sheriff and the Anglo element of the town. What did you make of this film?
This was an interesting one for me because it was one of the more anticipated films for me of the festival. Midsommar is maybe one of my favorite horror films, and I find the sort of shift in Aster's style that happened with Beau is Afraid very fascinating. So I appreciate what he was doing there, but didn't find it quite as enjoyable as his previous two. So I was curious to see, would this one continue that thread? Would he be doing something else? And it seems obvious he's continuing the thread of whatever he's developing there. I don't even know what to call it, like a sort of horror comedy, I guess. He's just piling on the anxious absurdity, turning things up as loud as he can with the volume of just sensory overload, it seems. And I really appreciated how that captured the sort of a certain feeling of being within that landscape at that time. I think he captured that better than I've seen captured by anyone else. But I remember I was sitting there probably about midway through, and I was like, okay, he's really giving me a sense of what it felt like to be there.
Yeah.
Inundated by social media and sort of the insanity of everything and trapped within this landscape. And I was like, how do we get out of this? Or where does this resolve? Where does it go? And I was curious to see what direction he would take that. And I think that's where my mixed feelings about the film come in.
The sort of generic sort of mishmash that goes along with it.
It didn't really feel like he had anything to offer us then by the end besides sort of capturing that feeling. Which might offer a sort of catharsis in and of itself, but what, I don't know. I guess I struggle with what's the value of just reliving that experience viscerally to some extent.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. There's several things that I took away from it. One was that it felt very much like and I think this is true of Beau is Afraid, talking about that sort of going from something that was more or less straight horror.
Yeah.
Maybe, I think Midsommar is much more satirical than Hereditary. Hereditary strikes me as a straight horror movie.
Yeah.
But Beau is Afraid always struck me as a Charlie Kaufman.
Yes.
It felt very influenced by Charlie Kaufman. And I remember when Charlie Kaufman made Syndicate New York, his sort of rationale was he was originally going to have he was writing it with Spike Jonze as a collaboration, and they said, "What? Let's write a horror movie." And so it feels like that inflection of panic and anxiety and surrealness goes into both that film, Beau's Afraid, and now Eddington. So that was one thing. The other thing that was interesting was reading up on the film is to realize that this film was actually in development before Hereditary and Midsommar.
Oh, wow.
And has been a long gestating sort of modern Western was the idea.
Yeah.
And in fact, Joaquin Phoenix's sheriff looks like Josh Brolin.
Yes.
I know he's not playing a sheriff, but in No Country for Old Men has the sort of somewhere between Tommy Lee Jones and Josh Brolin.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And that might, to some degree, explain some of the sort of broader generic swipes and swerves that the film takes later.
Yeah. Are we concerned about spoilers here?
No, let's not be. Let's decide not to be. So if you want to skip ahead and avoid spoilers, we're gonna.
Yeah, I don't know if I have any specific spoilers at this moment, but it's difficult to talk about sort of where it's going.
I'll tell you what, let me give a brief synopsis, and then we'll see where we go from there. So essentially what happens is the Joaquin Phoenix character decides that he's going to run for mayor, partly to spite Pedro Pascal's character, who he believes has had earlier affair, sort of predating his marriage with Emma Stone. And it's kind of a very alpha male move. But it's also partly because he is exacerbated by the masking regulations, which he sees as overly constricting. And it's very weird because, and this is where the mixed messages of the film sort of begin, because he sort of cries out to some sort of kindness in human nature.
Yes.
You can't treat people like this. Stop being so. And it's just like, but hang on a minute. The other side of the argument is people are genuinely dying across the country of this disease. And isn't it an act of kindness to, and if someone has asthma, then, we can work with that. You can give the shopping list to the clerk and they can go and do it for you. You know, it seems to be set up as some sort of binary from the get-go, which I don't think it necessarily is, but it is sort of how that plays out. Yeah. Added to this, there is a cult leader played by Austin Butler, who looks like Jared Leto as a very obvious reference. And then from then on, I would just say, it just gets crazier and crazier. Yeah. And he basically throws everything in the kitchen sink in there, from every political reference you can, with some notable absences. Trump is not mentioned.
Yes.
MAGA is referred to obliquely, rather than intently. And that, and the film, for me, and I'd really be interested to hear your point of view as an American, for me it felt steeped in cynicism. It felt like a plague on both your houses, quite literally.
No, it definitely felt not, I don't know if nihilistic is the right word, but what I was alluding to earlier was kind of like, he doesn't envision a path out for these characters. Everyone seems gripped by a sort of insanity. And I think one thing he does, interestingly, is kind of ground some of the motivations behind why people are driven to that insanity in things that feel real for each character to us. So the Joe Cross character and his obsession over masks and his wanting to defy that's something, we saw in reality in America and other places as well. Those characters existed. And from the outside, it's easy to sort of put that down or see it as absurd. But, Astor makes the choice to give Joe Cross a reason for that, to make him asthmatic. And it's not purely an ideological choice. He's gripped by an ideology at a certain point, but he gives him a reason for that. And I think the same thing's true of Emma Stone and the mother, I'm forgetting her name, their sort of move into conspiracy and cults respectively, it's, you can see the sort of insanity there, the grip of extremism, but also underneath that there appears to be like true human reasons that are driving them towards some of these things. So I thought that was interesting, in that it 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 seems like it was building up this case that, okay, all these people are being gripped by this thing, driven to extremes, driven to hypocrisy, driven to whatever it is. But I think this may be true in reality, underlying that there's human reasons for why we initially why people are sucked into that. Some, feeling of need or inadequacy or something that's being overlooked that, doesn't get doesn't get proper acknowledgement or treatment, and then you become vulnerable to extremism. That's not to excuse any of that.
Right. Yeah.
But I find that sort of like basic empathy that he builds into the film like an interesting starting place. But then from there, it just escalates and escalates into just a continuing absurdity until you kind of lose that ability to have any sort of empathy for specifically Joe Cross, I think.
Yeah, it's doing the Walter White thing of like, how long are you going to stay with this guy until you realize he's not a good man?
Right.
And it reminded me a lot of the Fargo television series.
Yes.
Where it was creating situations of extreme desperation, and then the resolutions were often extreme violence.
Yeah.
And that extreme violence shown as spectacle and comedy, and dark comedy. So, somebody gets their limbs literally blown off, and it's played for a laugh.
Yeah.
Now, I think you can do that if it's earned. For me, this didn't feel earned. It just felt cynical. And I agree with you totally about that thing of giving empathy to some of those characters who were not writing them off. But I also thought that when it came to like the Black Lives Matter protesters, their subtle motivations were hypocrisy and hormones.
Yes.
Pedro Pascal's motivations were corrupt.
Yeah.
Maybe he wants to have a certain vision of the town and everything. Right. And there was a mixture of sort of very low-hanging fruit, the racist deputy who, could be played by Sam Rockwell in 3 Billboards, Ebbing, Missouri. The conspiracy theorist of the mother-in-law. But then there was also this strange cynicism to people who just weren't taken seriously. And I thought one of the most disturbing characters who is treated like this is Emma Stone's character of the wife, who has kind of like a serious mental health issue. And it's played for laughs. And, this is where it felt kind of confused and flailing. And I think when you make a film which is engaging in a political argument, it's engaging in the world politically, that's I kind of want to trust you as a director. I kind of want to trust that you've got a vision. When I watch Network, I trust Sidney Lumet. Right. And that's a deeply cynical film, but I know that film has genuine knowledge of the problem and a genuine sort of vision.
Yeah.
And I'm not talking about didactics or polemics. I'm not even, you could argue that Network creates Sean Hannity as much as anything else.
Yeah. I definitely see the cynicism there, because he doesn't then offer us any escape. It just feels like by the end, it's like, okay, all this is happening and we're just kind of trapped here, that confusion you're talking about, there's part of me wonders about like what the movie is trying to accomplish in terms of, is this, or I guess I'll put it this way, the flailing confusion to me does echo some part of like what it feels like to be inside of the American experience at this moment.
That's exactly what I'm struggling with the film. I feel it's a divisive film that describes division. It's a confused film that describes confusion.
Right.
And I'm not sure if that depiction of that sort of participation in the things it's actually criticizing is entirely in Asta's control. I mean, he strikes me as a very clever person who in some way sort of lacks humility, the humility of sort of like, read a newspaper and sort of talk to some people, because not all of these problems are completely
right.
Both sides.
Yeah. I think I see a lot of parallels between, or a lot of the reasons I ended up feeling lukewarm on this, despite appreciating, I think.
So let's just get this clear.
Sure.
I think I feel quite negative on it.
Yes, yeah.
And I think you feel much more positive, but not positive.
I'll put it this way. Like, I think there's a certain cathartic value in his project of like holding a mirror up to certain things.
Right.
I have some like mild concerns about its message politically. I think the most explicit thing being the portrayal of Antifa as like a actually violent organization, which doesn't really have a bearing to reality in America in the same way that a lot of the other things he depicts. Like, there's the choice at the end to have these two characters who are kind of on the more, let's say, conservative side of the coin, become sort of conservative heroes at the end.
Yeah.
And that reflects this reality of, conservative America embracing these absurd figures, despite the irrationality of it. And so that feels like a very real, grounded in a sort of reality. But then, we just have sort of Antifa flying in as an unnamed source. And that's where it felt like maybe the genre, like, oh, you have to have a shootout. So at some point you have to have this, but that doesn't really reflect a reality that's actually happening.
It almost felt like a lack of nerve there, that we needed to wake up the audience and give them something to go out.
Right. And in the political reality in America, it's like one side is violently engaging in like gun violence, and the other side, at least not nearly as, the difference is so staggering as to, basically be, So I think portraying them as sort of equally violent, that's the one misstep where I feel like it does tip into that, okay, both sides territory. I think the ribbing at the sort of progressive movement hypocrisy is light enough compared to just how hard he's kind of coming down on the more conservative absurdity that I don't see that as too disbalanced of a critique. But then, it's the real thing is his movement towards that conclusion of, okay, so we're stuck here. So what? Now what? And it's like, that doesn't tell me anything that I don't already feel or know. Like, offer me a token of, but that's what he does with Beau's Afraid too. It just constructs this grand nightmare of anxiety. Like this character's, Beau's worst nightmare comes into reality, and then that's it. That's the entire film. I felt there's no hint at what can be done to avoid this. How do we, which not every film needs to provide that. But if you're going to take me into that sort of visceral nightmare, it's nice to offer that. Yeah,
there's a great Hanif Qureshi quote where he said, "I felt like somebody had woken me up to tell me nothing."
Yes.
And, and that's
that's like a great way of putting it.
Sort of jarring. Okay, great effect, but if you've not got anything to tell me, you're just shocking me, or you're just disturbing me without purpose.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move on to the next film, another American film. This by Michael Corvino, I think his second feature, which he has made with his sort of writing and producing partner, Kyle Marvin. I believe he's called. And they previously did a film that was in Cannes a few years ago called The Climb, which I saw here, admired greatly. And I interviewed the pair of them for that film and found them really the sort of people you want to be making films. I was kind of surprised that they dropped out. You know, you see the film on Mubi, and but it didn't. I don't think it made much business, and they weren't making the second film straight away or the third film.
Yeah.
This is called Splitsville, and it stars Dakota Johnson, Michael Covino, Kyle Marvin, and the Hispanic actress from Hitman, whose name is
Adrina. I'm not sure her last name.
Yeah, well, I'll look it up in 1 second.
She's also a lead in Andor, which is
right,
been quite popular at the moment.
Of course, yeah, that's absolutely on everybody's radar. Everybody's talking about it. Okay, so what did you make of this film?
This was easily the most fun I've had at the festival so far, which was a nice change of pace. So many of the films I've seen have been engaging with really heavy material. Adrina Arjona?
Yeah, Ariona, maybe?
Yeah.
Adria Ariona, I think. I'm going to go with that.
Okay.
Oh, thunder.
Some thunder, yes.
Dramatic. The most fun you've had at the festival thus far?
Yes, yeah. The audience I was in loved it. It was just like uproarious.
Did you see it
laughter.
at the Bussy?
Yes.
Right, same here.
Yeah.
So we were in the same screening.
Yeah, I thought it was just. It's been a long time since. I think there's been some talk about sort of almost this disappearing genre of like the mid-budget, which I don't know what the budget for this film was, but the mid-budget sort of adult comedy as being a thing that's disappeared. And this very much just felt like a well-constructed, smartly written, funny comedy for adults. And it was nice to see that. I think I remember previous times being here, there were some films that I found very funny, the entire audience found very funny, and then by the time I got back to the States, rewatched it with an audience there that was smaller, it felt less, so I'm not sure how much to trust.
Tony Erdmann being a little bit like that.
Yeah.
Everybody was screaming with laughter at the original screening, and then I sort of watched it on my own at home and thought, well, I mean, it's not funny, but it's not that funny.
Right.
And it is in German. So,
yeah. So I'm not sure how much to trust that experience as like a indicator of how funny the film will be received by a general audience, but
I'm fairly confident. Let's just go quickly through the sort of synopsis, and then we'll talk a little bit more in detail. Basically, this film is about a man who is on his way for a short stay with friends with his wife, and a mishap in the car, which is like one of the most original and funny and daring openings to a film I've ever seen.
Yes.
I'm not going to spoil it for you, but it's absolutely wild. Leads to precipitates the breakdown of their relationship, and the wife wants a divorce, and things go. And when he arrives at the friend's house alone, his friend, played by Michael Colvino, the writer-director, and I think he's called Mike in the film as well.
I think you're
right.
They
both have names which are similar to their names. It's Kerry and Mike rather than. Reveals that he's in an open relationship with his wife, and things escalate from that point on. His wife is played by Dakota Johnson. And so it's really about these two couples who are shifting. It's like a Much Ado About Nothing or a Mozart opera. They're shifting relationships, bed swapping. There are other lovers who come in and go and leave. There's a son who is a little sort of, if he was a Dungeons and Dragons character, would be chaotic good. The humor runs the gamut of broad slapstick comedy of the style I've not seen done
Yes.
so well for a long time. Really snappy, witty dialogue.
Yes.
Character stuff, just kind of everything. Pretty low humor at times
Right.
in terms of, there's a pretty good dick joke in there. And I was just, same as you. It was the most entertainment I'd had in the festival. I'd already, laughed at the climb and really enjoyed that. So it was no surprise this was funny, but this was like spectacularly better than the climb, and the climb was already very good.
Yeah. No, I think what struck me was the confidence of the sense of humor, and like you were saying, it runs the gamut in terms of type of humor, but I think also it's making jokes that involve the camera, jokes that involve editing and
It's
film
specifically
form.
cinematic.
Yes.
It's not like a television. We could do this on TV. You couldn't.
Right.
This
No.
has to be cinema.
Yes. So I appreciated that so much because a lot of there's a certain brand of comedy movie to me that it feels like, okay, the jokes are in the writing, and then they set it up, they film the jokes, and that can work, but it's always fun to see somebody who's just like using all the tools of filmmaking in a comedic fashion, and it's even to the point of just understanding there's a very comedic fight scene that's maybe one of the funniest scenes I've seen in a long time, but also easily the best comedic fight I think I've ever seen in something, at least at first impression. And the basic joke of it is it's played, like the action of it is played completely straight. Like it's shot, the action of the fighting is better than some action fight scenes that I've seen in certain movies.
It could be John Wick.
Exactly, yes. And yet it's within this completely absurd context of a comedy film. And so just understanding how funny that juxtaposition would be and being able to pull that off, I think is a really impressive move. I wonder if that might get too loud.
The rain has started falling down, and we're recording in a sort of tense situation. So let me just check the how loud that is. Okay, so we've moved inside now because there was a tempest coming down on the tent outside. So the audio here should be a little bit better, although there's a background hubbub, as you can see. It's very difficult to find a quiet place.
Yes, indeed.
Everybody is running from the elements. So,
yes.
So let's finish off Splitsville. You've talked about the fight scene, which I totally agree with you. I think it's one of the way it escalates, and I think one of the important elements is it's a fight between two best friends.
Yes.
So there's this real tension of we want to hurt each other, but not too much.
Yes.
And we know each other very well, and that lends a real pathos to the comedy as well. I do agree with you also about the sort of the relative rarity of a really decent Hollywood, although I'm assuming this is an independent movie, comedy. You think of films like Bottoms and Date Night, and they're once in a blue moon. You might get one or two a year, but compared to other genres, Hollywood seems to favor kind of vehicles for SNL actors and performers, or kind of like action comedies, sort of something which is an action film but with jokes.
Right. And this had genuine comedy and it felt to me like genuine drama. I was invested in these characters and how things were going to play out. I wanted things to work out for them, which I think is a really important piece of the puzzle as well. They weren't underdeveloped as characters, and the performances had a genuineness to them that endeared me to them and yeah, made me invested in their stories.
And the lanky guy from Succession turns up as a mentalist.
Yes.
And there's a lot of humor. I think it just has a brilliant short role.
Yeah.
I also loved talking about like cinematic elements of humor. I love they have a meeting in the sort of principal of the school. And on his wall is a portrait of Nelson Mandela, a portrait of Martin Luther King, and in the middle a portrait of himself.
Yes.
So just that moment was, absolutely hilarious.
Yeah, I was really quite impressed with. Now I'm forgetting his name, but the lead.
This is Kyle Marvin, I think.
Yes, I've seen him briefly in a few things, but his just like him and Michael Corvée both with their comedic timing and delivery, and I thought they were just two really excellent, very excellent comedic performances. The women are great as well. But it felt to me almost like they play the straight men a little bit to the two guys who are a little bit more ridiculous.
Yeah.
It felt.
They feel like a double act. They feel like, Martin and Lewis or Laurel and Hardy in the case of the fight scene, for instance. And there's a kind of weirdness a weird normality to them as well, that they're always, Kyle Marvin has this sort of slightly, like back of his mouth voice, sort of like, I've got a weak voice, I know. He's a big guy, and Michael Corvino has this sort of hungry, sort of chiseled look to him, and they just really complement each other. And I agree with you. There's a real heart to the film. I really cared about what happened with the characters, and there's some surprises. There's some characters which often, rom-coms are kind of known for their well-trod sort of ideas, but it doesn't fall into those cliches of the wacky neighbor and the gay best friend and all that sort of thing.
Yes. Yeah, I was surprised by where the story took us. I don't think I saw where it was going, but it didn't feel unearned. And I think I hate using the word the phrase it had heart because it sounds cliche, but like I did feel that, and it sold that I think better than I was expecting it to. So yeah, very funny and one that I'll be happy to watch again, put on for friends. And
I think it's the first film I've seen at the festival that I would sort of like unreservedly recommend to everybody.
Yes.
Other films I loved, maybe even admire and love more, but that's the one that I know everybody will love. Whereas other ones like Surat, for instance, a bit more divisive, so a little bit more caution, buyer beware. Okay, let's shift tone and for the next film, which is Julia Ducournau's follow-up to Aurore and the Palme d'Or winning Titane. She's called this one's called Alpha, which is the main character of the 13-year-old girl, although we see her also as a younger girl for a slot. The context is Le Havre during the 1980s, and there is a disease that seems to be spreading, and an obvious analog to AIDS. It is spread via sex and blood in terms of needles. And she has a tattoo at the very beginning of the film made with a needle that it doesn't seem to be sterilized.
Yes.
And this sort of sets off her mother worrying about whether she's going to develop this disease. And her mother is a doctor who works in amongst victims of this disease. And the disease, I think, in one of the most striking and perhaps the most successful part of the film or element of the film seems to turn people into statues, essentially.
Yes.
What was your take?
There's a central kind of relationship that propels the film, which is the mother and daughter, as you also mentioned, but then there's an uncle, a brother of the mother, and he he is infected with this disease, so he's grappling with that. And then there's, as you said, this concern about whether or not the alpha of the daughter and our lead is. And yeah, there was a lot of imagery and some scenes in it that were very evocative, which is what I expected based on her previous work. I think especially that central imagery of the stone bodies was quite effectively done, and felt that was the element of the film that gave me a similar feeling to what I got from Parts of Titan, where I just, there's something inside of me sort of squirming a little bit, wanting to get away from what I was seeing.
Although it has to be said, this is a sort of, I felt to me like a toning down of that sort of extreme cinema that we had in Raw as
Absolutely.
well.
This is much more of a, it would be wrong to call it a straight drama, but it's much more of a drama than something like Titan is, with these kind of elements of body horror or this very bleak atmosphere kind of infused into it. And there were certain things that worked for it in me, but worked in it for me. But overall, I found this one I was not able to become invested in the emotion of this film.
Yeah, I wondered about the 13-year-old lead.
Yes.
It's unfair to put too much weight on a child performance, but I didn't feel really compelled by her, and she would keep making decisions which were somewhat unmotivated by, something other than we want a sequence or we want a plot point. I was much more interested in the mother, played by Golshite Farahani, who I thought was amazing and really compelling performance. I really went with her. And of course the brother, played by Tahar Rahim, who people will know from The Prophet, the Odiad film, which I think maybe won the Palme d'Or, way back when it was released. It's a superb performance. He's always worth watching, and he's gone real Christian Bale for this one.
He's
physically transformed into the painfully thin man. There's obvious moments in this film which really stand out, and I think most of them are connected to music. There's a brilliant scene with Nick Cave's music used when they go to a nightclub, and a brilliant scene with Portishead right at the beginning in a party. And I love that music and the use of it. But I did also feel to some degree I was watching a really good pop video, or a really good, they're out playing football at night, and I was thinking, this looks like that Nike advert that we've all seen. As you say, there was a sort of retreat to something much more conventional. I mean, it's kind of like a simple ghost story when it comes down to it. But I wasn't quite sure if there was as much mystery as there was just confusion. I was sat watching the film thinking, for instance, there are obviously two timelines in this film, but that isn't obvious until very late on.
Yeah.
And when the revelation comes, I, as a viewer, felt more annoyance that I hadn't cottoned on sooner.
Yes.
Than I felt like it was supposed to be a twist or anything.
And I didn't feel like I really understood the purpose of that revelation, or why those two. I mean, there was an obvious. I won't spoil anything but like it's grappling with like a trauma in the past and its reflection in the present. But the way that revelation happens was so confused that instead of just feeling this profound impact of that realization, there was, I guess confusion is just the right word.
Yeah, I was confounded. I thought, I should have got that sooner.
Right.
Rather than, that guy is the thing that does that.
Yes.
Did that. And also, this felt like a lot of unexplored avenues. Like, for instance, there's societal fear. There's a brilliant scene in the swimming pool with her school friends, and those scenes at school were really interesting. And then there's a scene of the hospital becoming overrun almost by which felt like something out of a zombie movie. And then those issues and those problems were just sort of left up totally unresolved. I'm not asking for the film to deliver answers, but it didn't even sort of acknowledge that they've remained unresolved. It didn't. It didn't sort of. It just seemed to forget them.
Yeah. No, I think that was the conflict here for me. Was formally there's it's unconventional. There's the two timelines. There's some very expressive sort of sequences of subjectivity. There's elements where we're not sure what's real and what isn't. There's the great use of music, and the body horror elements. This sort of design of the world is this like windy kind of just very bleak place I thought was interesting. But underneath that, this like central metaphor, it felt like, and what that was exploring just felt quite almost simplistic to me, and didn't really give me anything beyond other films that I've seen that have already explored AIDS or addiction or these kinds of traumas. And I think, grappling with expectations a little bit, I was hoping for more of that, like just almost being overcome with sort of like a sensory, transcendent, visceral quality that Titan had, and this just much more subdued, and never came to that point, which it wouldn't need to. But then, in the absence of that, I didn't feel much else there to sort of resonate with.
I feel a little bit that that to some degree Dukanau has been maybe outflanked by the substance and Coralie Faget.
Yeah.
And you can't really do that extreme cinema for ad nauseum unless you're Gaspar Noé.
Right.
And even Gaspar Noé, I think his most successful film was Vortex, which totally eschewed that sort of approach. I don't mind the statues not really making much sense as a metaphor, just for the look of them and the feel of them, and this is, by the way, sort of, we always notice patterns in festivals, and Cannes is no different. This has been a festival of amazing sound design.
I agree.
Sound design has been so integral to so many films in this festival.
I agree. Yeah. No, I guess when I say the metaphor is simplistic, to clarify, I think that.
Oh, I'm not denying it. It's definitely simplistic. I totally agree with that.
Yeah, that I think the visual and emotional metaphor there, like, made me feel that viscerally in a way that just depicting like physical disease or sick people would not have. So I think it's just more like the relational, emotional arc towards the end. At some point, it just doesn't lose me, but it didn't. I felt like it should have and wanted me to go somewhere emotionally that it just didn't manage to take me.
And because of the doubling of the timeline and the doubling, there's also a doubling of certain scenes as well.
Yes.
And I was wondering if, I don't know, a little bit of a longer edit, they might go back and take out some of those scenes, because it feels like you're hitting the same beats twice, and halving the impact of both times.
Yeah. No, I think that's true. Definitely still a very obviously unique and singular kind of voice at work here. And I think, as you're saying, sort of finding a place outside of that just intensity will maybe be a transition. I'll still be excited to see what's next after this.
Absolutely.
Certainly.
And I think this is an intriguing direction. I think there's an element of like, this but
a little tighter, maybe more refined in certain ways, or developed, and
sort of like, what are we going to do without the fireworks?
Yes.
What are we going to do without the, a guitarist without their pedals?
Right.
Yeah. So Thomas, before we finish, what are you looking forward to in the next few days?
Well, still to come for me are two of my most anticipated films, which are the Kelly Reichardt, The Mastermind. I'm a huge
Just
fan
shown
of
on the last day.
I'm a huge fan of her work. I think she's really underrated, mostly just because, she does very understated, almost anti-dramas a lot of times, and I think the audience for that, appreciation for that is kind of small, but I think she's a beautiful, like, her, she has a mastery of the craft.
Yes.
That is just really subtle and understated, and I'm excited. This one seems like it might be more of a genre piece, so I'm interested to see where that
heist movie.
Yes.
I've heard, and she's done a western with
Right.
Mix cut off, and she's done kind of a little bit like an eco heist movie with night moves.
Yes.
So yeah, that'll be an interesting.
We'll see, but I'm excited for that, and I'm also quite excited for Sentimental Value.
This is Joaquin Trier.
Yes.
Film.
Yeah, I really enjoyed The Worst Person in the World, and I'm interested to see that. So we'll see. The theme for the festival for me, though, so far has been me mostly enjoying, but feeling a little subdued about the ones I've really been excited about, and then being very surprised by the ones I didn't know anything about, or some of the.
What have been your surprises then?
The surprises have been Surat. I quite enjoyed. Knew nothing going in. The Harris Dickinson film Urchin.
Wonderful.
I liked quite a lot. I thought that was a really very solid debut film. I also enjoyed Nigeria was represented at the festival for the first time by Akinola Davies Jr., I think is the name of the director. His film My Father's Shadow I thought was quite beautiful.
I've heard really good things about that.
And so yeah, just some of the out of competition films that I just kind of went to on a whim have ended up being some of the more enjoyable experiences.
And I'm really looking forward to it. On Friday, they're showing Barry Lyndon.
Yes, I have a ticket for that.
I've got my ticket for that. So
I feel like that might be a nice way to kind of wind down at the end of things and just...
Precisely that.
Yes.
I saw The Shining here, and I saw 2001: A Space Odyssey here, and there's always sort of like a member of the Kubrick family turns up, and it's a really beautiful experience. I'm really looking forward to that as you say, as a way of finishing the feast.
Yes.
The sgroppino, as we would have in Italian, the unknotting.
Yes, yes.
Well, listen, Thomas, it's been wonderful talking to you. Where can people see your work? Because there's your YouTube channel.
Yes, there's two places you can find me. You can find me on YouTube. Look up Thomas Flight. I'll be there. Those are my video essays that I put out about once a month. I'll have a recap video of for the festival eventually. I also have a newsletter that you can find. There's links to it on the channel. You can search. It's currently named Seeing Through Film. seeingthroughfilm.com.
Seen as in SC?
Yes, SEEING.
Okay.
Through Film. So that's where I put my writing. So that's where I'll be. That's
excellent. That's wonderful. We're just seeing some famous people walking by, and I'm squinting. That's Tahar Rahim, who seems to have put on some weight. That's good to see, because he did look unhealthily thin. And Julia Ducanau walking by. So they're off for lunch, and me and Thomas are going to go for lunch now. Brilliant. Thank you so much, Thomas.
Thanks so much for having me.
Great.